Something I want to say that I didn't in my first video this month is that I'm reviewing some of King's lesser known works, so don't expect something like The Shining or Carrie anytime soon. Revival is interesting to me because it grew on me over time. My initial reaction to Revival was, well...
What the hell was that?
But much like Wendy's Button Box, which I will be reviewing later in the month, it, as I said, grew on me. When you first open the novel, King dedicates his story to the likes of Mary Shelley, Bram Stoker, H.P. Lovecraft, Peter Straub, and a few others. And I can see why. I'm definitely getting a very heavy H.P. Lovecraft vibe from Revival. This story scared me, mostly due to its depiction of the afterlife. When it comes to books, very little scares me, but Revival managed. However, when it comes to the actual religious implications of Revival, it's about as subtle as an acid catheter being shoved up my dick hole. Allow me to introduce the Stephen King checklist. The nostalgia critic already turned his tropes into a drinking game, and frankly, I don't want to die. So here you go, the Stephen King checklist. And, wouldn't you know it, Revival ticks every box. We have a young boy named Jamie, who lives in Harlow, Maine. He later grows up to be a coke-snorting, heroin-shooting, drug-addicted rock star. As a boy, he befriends a preacher named Charles Jacobs, who moves to town with his wife and son. Despite everyone in the church putting on the front of being godly folks, and the preacher's family is killed in an accident, and Jacob starts questioning his faith and God's existence, they run him off and kick him out of the church. Jacob spends the rest of his life using electric experiments to heal the sick, pretending to have a healing touch blessed to him by God. In truth, he's using everyone as guinea pigs for his experiments, with the purpose of getting back at God by conning his people. He also hopes to see his wife and son in the afterlife, so he ultimately brings a dead woman back after blackmailing a now adult Jamie to help him. This results in some freaky-deaky shit going down where a demon referred to as the Mother takes over the dead woman's body, and Jamie learns that the afterlife is nothing more than a haven of torture, with humans mindlessly obeying the Mother in agony for all eternity. Also, several people that Jacob supposedly cures go on later to either commit suicide or kill others before offing themselves. I'm fine with religious imagery and all, but the reader is beaten over the head with it here. I know this is common for King, and he isn't wrong when he points out the religious hypocrisy. For instance, the old man outing the preacher's wife as a drunk because Jacobs refuses to see the way that they do. Basically what happens is Jacobs is going on this rant about how God doesn't exist and how God's evil and how he hurts people, and this old man stands up and says, yeah, well, they found booze in your wife's car, so it's her fault and blah blah blah. You know, way to stab a man in the back after life has already shanked him in the ass. But this constant religious crap, it's like sugar for diabetics. There's only so much of this I can take before my pancreas stops functioning. When you write lines like, religion is the theological equivalent of a quick buck insurance scam, where you pay your premium year after year, and then, when you need the benefits you paid for so, pardon the pun, so religiously, you discover the company that took your money does not in fact exist. And you call certain religious people ants with dead eyes and poison dripping from their mouths? I get it. You've been crapping on religios since 1974. I get it. In terms of things I liked, as I said, the afterlife is kind of a touchy subject. The idea that our existence is nothing, and that we have nothing to look forward to except torture, kind of scared me. The idea that we just have a set path and that our free will is moot. All of these religions claim that the good will inherit the earth and that the afterlife will be paved in gold, but what if there is an afterlife, but all there is hell? Most of Revival is Jamie's life story and how he keeps bumping into Jacobs throughout the years. He's telling the story to us, and as always, King builds tension masterfully, and the way the story's told gave me some serious Shadow over Innsmouth flashbacks. There are problems, obviously. Occasionally, King does get heavy with the dialogue exposition. He's pretty good with it usually, but there's one segment on page 189 that actually baffled me. After Jacobs uses his electric shock therapy on Jamie, he claims Jamie was telling him things, and repeats back the entire story about how Jamie's sister married an abuser and was murdered by him. This is something Jamie already knows, and instead of drip-feeding us clues about Claire, his sister, over time, it's dumped right in our laps like a smelly load of shit. It was also sloppy as hell to read. Secondly, writers. Any writer watching this. There are certain words that at one point had a meaning, but now in present day mean something else. If you look up the term for ejaculate, I understand it means to say something with urgency, but it is also a term used for squirting cum out of your dick. For the love of God, Stephen King, on page 263, there were more cries and ejaculations? Really? I know some people really love God, but I don't think you're supposed to bust a nut during the sermon. Finally, King has said so himself that he tries to write with a certain warmth, and for the most part, he does. He can write about hotels taking over a man's brain, a child being tormented after having her first period, hell, a man wasting away due to a gypsy curse. And I want to come back to it regardless of how messed up it is. But Revival feels cold. Very bitter and angry. I know writers sometimes use their works to state their opinions, but this felt less like a book and more like a soapbox. It was a very angry, bitter novel that made me uncomfortable, not just for its take on the afterlife, but for the obvious malice written in its words. It's not bad by any means. I like Jamie. His life is very interesting. King builds the tension perfectly, and the way the story is written harkens back to Lovecraft. But I also have issues with the book that really put me off, mostly the tone and the preachy nature of the religious message. For that, I'm going to go ahead and give Revival a B-.